All right, today we are jumping into something pretty incredible, one of the coolest feats in all of biology, really. We're talking about how the brain literally teaches itself, how it physically rewires its own circuits just by experiencing the world. So, how does it pull that off? Let's get into it. I mean, just think about that for a second. You've done this a million times, right? You hear a sound over there and your head just turns. It feels like nothing. It's completely automatic. But underneath that simple, effortless action, there's this whole universe of lightning-fast computation going on. How on earth does your brain know where there is just from a sound wave hitting your ear? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to piece together today. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with that simple head turn and look at how the brain even builds maps of the world in the first place. Then we're going to meet our expert guide for this journey, the barn owl, and see what happens when its world gets totally flipped upside down. And from there, we'll go deep into the actual nuts and bolts of brain rewiring and finish up with the huge lessons this teaches us and the questions that still... Okay, so first things first. We have to get this one huge idea on the table. The map of the worlds inside your head isn't printed in permanent ink. It's not fixed. It's malleable. It's constantly being tweaked, updated, and recalibrated based on everything you experience. It's like a GPS that's always updating to match the real world. And this incredible ability to change has a name: neuroplasticity. This is the absolute foundation of all learning, of all memory, and it's not just some abstract idea. It's a physical process. We're talking about the brain literally forging new connections and pruning old ones to adapt. You could say it's the biological engine that drives all learning. So, to really understand how this works, scientists needed a creature where this whole process is kind of put on display, exaggerated and easy to measure. And for that, they turned to the barn owl. This animal is an absolute master of sound. It can pinpoint the tiniest rustle of a mouse in total pitch-black darkness. Its brain is basically a supercomputer designed for one thing: building a perfect map of the world out of sound.
So how does it do it? What's the secret? Well, the owl's brain isn't guessing. It's a precision instrument, and it makes its calculations based on two very specific clues it pulls from the sound itself.
First up is what's called the interaural timing difference, or ITD for short. It's pretty simple, actually. If a sound comes from your left, it's going to hit your left ear just a tiny, tiny fraction of a second before it hits your right ear. We're talking microseconds here. The owl's brain measures that microscopic delay and uses it to calculate the sound's horizontal position, its left-right location. It's just an insanely precise calculation. The second clue is the interaural level difference, or ILD. That's just the difference in loudness between the two ears. But here's where the barn owl has a superpower. Its ears are actually asymmetrical. One is a little higher than the other. This little quirk creates a huge difference in how loud a sound is, depending on whether it's coming from above or below. This gives the owl an incredible lock on a sound's vertical or up-down position. So think of it like coordinates on a graph. The brain takes the ITD for the horizontal, left-right axis, and the ILD for the vertical, up-down axis. It puts them together and boom, it creates a perfect two-dimensional grid of where every sound is coming from. It's a map of the world built entirely out of sound. Okay, so the brain builds this incredible map, but what happens if the map is wrong? What if what you hear suddenly doesn't match up with what you see? How does the brain fix a mistake? Well, this question led to a truly brilliant experiment. Scientists decided to mess with the owl's senses on purpose. What they did was they fitted young owls with these tiny little glasses. But these weren't for correcting their vision. They had prisms in them that shifted everything the owl saw exactly 23 degrees to the right. So now, when an owl heard a sound coming from straight ahead, its eyes were telling its brain that the sound was actually way off to the right. Its senses were now in direct conflict. And the results were just wild. On the very first day, the owl was a mess. It would hear a sound, turn its head to where it saw the sound, and miss the real target by exactly 23 degrees every single time. But then you fast forward 42 days, and it's perfect. Its brain completely recalibrated. It learned to reinterpret sound to match this new, shifted visual world. It had literally taught itself a new reality. And, this wasn't an overnight fix. It took a full 42 days, 6 weeks for the brain to slowly, methodically, and fundamentally rewrite its own internal map of the world.
It just goes to show you that this kind of deep learning, this plasticity, is a very deliberate process of rebuilding itself.
So, this is where it gets really fascinating. We know what happened, but we still don't know how. How did the brain actually pull this off? Well, to find out, the researchers had to go inside to look at the specific neural pathway in the owl's midbrain that's responsible for all this. And they found a really clear three-step assembly line. First, you have the ICC, which just processes the raw sound data, the ITD and ILD. Then that info gets sent to the ICX. Now, this is the key part. The ICX is where the auditory map is actually built. This is ground zero for plasticity. It's where the learning happens. Finally, that finished sound map is sent to a place called the optic tectum, which is where it gets merged with the visual map to guide the owl's head. But how does the sound map know it needs to change? Well, the visual system, which has the correct information, essentially sends it a memo. It's called an instructive signal. It's basically the visual part of the brain acting like a teacher, telling the auditory part, hey, you think the sound is over here, but you're wrong. It's actually over here. Fix it. And this rewiring happens at the microscopic level, at the individual connections, the synapses between brain cells. To build the new correct pathway, the brain uses these special learning receptors. But just as important, it also has to shut down the old incorrect pathway. It does that using inhibitory signals. So it's a two-part process. You're not just building a new road, you're actively putting up roadblocks on the old one. So look, this is all incredibly cool for barn owls, but what does it mean for us? Well, this isn't just some weird owl thing. This work reveals these really fundamental principles about how all brains, including ours, learn and adapt. It's like finding a blueprint for learning itself. And it boils down to three big takeaways. First, the brain's original factory settings wiring is always there. It's never erased, just paved over. Second, it is way, way easier to do this when you're young. There's this sensitive period in childhood where the brain is just incredibly plastic, like a sponge. And third, and this one is the real kicker, learning something when you're young leaves behind a permanent physical trace, even if you stop using it. This chart really drives that point home. Just look at the difference. If you do this experiment on a juvenile owl, its brain has this massive capacity for plasticity. It adapts. But if you try the same thing on a fully grown adult owl, almost nothing happens. That big window for learning has mostly closed. But here is probably the most fascinating part of this whole story. Let's say an owl learns to adapt to the prisms when it's young. Then you take the glasses off, and its brain reverts back to normal. But what happens if you put those same glasses back on when it's an adult? It relearns the adaptation, and it does it fast. Why? Because that experience from its youth left behind a learning trace, a kind of dormant circuit that's just waiting to be reactivated. And this leads us right to the frontier of this research, to the big questions scientists are still trying to answer. First off, what even is this learning trace? Physically, what is it in the brain? How do you store a whole backup map of reality that you're not even using but can call up years later? And the second big mystery is that instructive signal we talked about. We know the visual system is the teacher, but what language is it speaking? Is it a specific chemical it releases? Is it a certain pattern of electrical firing? We still don't know the nitty-gritty of how that teaching actually happens. And that brings us to the final question, the one that really matters most to us. If we can understand these mechanisms, could we figure out a way to reopen that sensitive period in adult humans? Could we unlock this incredible plasticity to help people recover from a stroke or a brain injury, or even just to help us learn complex new skills as adults? The barn owl has shown us what the brain is capable of. The challenge now is to figure out how to unlock that potential in ourselves.